This morning I woke up, and what I typically do is I will go online and I will look over, my emails or whatever, because I get slammed with emails, and do a little reading beforehand, do the morning devotion, and go downstairs and exercise and such. But this caught my eye, and I newly did this recording at that time. So somebody had posted about a sex offender in their area of I'm trying to remember, Garfield Heights or something like that down here. And they had posted this really horrific rap sheet, and they had mentioned that this person had been convicted of a murder, excuse me, and he had a rap sheet of 10 years long child imposition and molestation. Broke my heart to read this. It was terrible. But it wasn't clear, first of all, that he had murdered the child. Not that murder of any way is fine. But that didn't stop the poster from writing, one of our fine citizens. And as somebody who is also on the registry and knows many people who should not be on the registry as well, you know, when you encounter these things, you have to really look at them, and you have to really understand what's going on. So I wrote to the poster, not defending this person because I don't know anything about them, and a rap sheet like that is ridiculous. But I wanted him to know that the recidivism rate for sex crimes against children is 3.5%. Now, when you read several studies, I've read it as high as 4.3 and as low as 3.1. So the average of these that I've read, when I sort of synthesize them down, is 3.4. So I simply pointed this out to the poster, and I got a terrible response back from this guy saying, "You're so ignorant, you have no ideas. Look, there's 250 in my area." And again, one thing I left out is he was listed as a violent sexual predator. So let's see. I looked at the list. There were not 250 violent sexual predators who were also murderers, who may or may not have murdered children. And I didn't look up this person's charges, to be fair. But to be fair also, there's not 250. When I talk to the person that comes by here once a year, who makes sure that I still live here and make sure that I'm employed and all this other stuff they have to do to monitor us, after we did our time and everything. And for some of us who didn't commit any crime. But placement on the registry really doesn't have anything to do with crime, because there are many people, as I point out, as young as 9 on the registry. And what offense did a 9-year-old do? That's that's not redeemable. So in any event, this is what the compliance officer said to me. He said, I have 250 to 275 cases. Of those cases, no more than 20%, he told me about 4 or 5 months ago, are people I have to worry about. No more than that. So what does that mean exactly? It's about 30, 40 people, tops, that he's mildly concerned about. And we don't know about the rest as violent, certainly. What we do know is that he isn't worried about them. He said that most of these people live very quiet lives. There's nothing that really happened, and he doesn't worry about them. He says, you're one of them. He's referring to me. So the problem is when people are talking about and posting these things on NextDoor or other social media places, and they're saying, this is a violent person. They have no idea what they're talking about. They see sex offender and immediately jump to conclusions. And this is why the sex offender registry is bad. A, it doesn't do anything to inform the public. It creates hysteria and fear. Two, it prompts nitwits like this to jump to conclusions and to conclude that people who are on it are violent murderers who harm children. Now, certainly there are people like that out there on the registry, to be sure. There are also people like that out there who are not on the registry, who are violent murderers. There are people who are mentally ill who are violent. There are police officers who are violent killers. There are many, many people out there. And by the way, the recidivism rate, as I pointed out, is higher for grand larceny and other crimes than it is for so-called sex offenses. So again, it's a cautionary tale if anybody wants to pay attention to it. Now, it's much easier, as people will do. They will call me names on this. They will say, "You don't know anything. You're just fill in the blank." I've been called everything in the world, and that's fine. As I said, keep it coming. I can take it. Or show up at my door, as some of you have claimed that you're going to do, and fight me or spit at me or call me names or tell me to my face. Well, bring it on, babies. I've mentioned it many times, okay? All right? Because if that's what you need to do, maybe we can actually get to a detente and you can understand that for over 30 years, I certainly haven't done anything to anybody and never would. And the problem is you have people who are on this registry who the vast majority didn't do anything with children. Remember, you're on it for anything with an adult as well. Okay? On it for uh, things that you may or may not have done, things that you attempted to do, or things that you were accused or found guilty of attempting to do. So I was in prison with somebody, in jail, excuse me, with somebody who um, had sex with a girl at a party. And unfortunately, he decided to join in with a number of other knuckleheads who had sex with this girl when she was unconscious. And the process of doing that, when they went and did the rape kit after she cleaned herself up a couple of times, guess whose evidence was present? So he got nailed for it based on two small samples. Well, I'm not defending him, but he is going to get 20 years in prison. I'm not sure 20 years is an adequate uh, amount. Now, I talked to you about Dr. Kilpatrick, who's on the other coast, who, for talking to somebody who claimed to be 24 and then switched it up and said 14, he gets 35 years. Okay? Daniel Kim, who's in a facility here in Virginia, who had consensual sex when he was 29 with one of his 17-year-old students, who actually was 16, he gets 12 years. Okay? Caitlin Grimley, who had sex multiple times with her eighth grade math student, gets zero and zero time in the registry. And after a year, which should be just about up in December, she's going to get to go back to teaching. So when you're talking about the registry solving all these problems, where does that happen? What public safety goal has been met? Oh, there's a list. I can see where they're at. Sure. And what are you going to do about it? You're going to go over there and blow them away? You're going to say be careful around that person because you know what? All the new sex offenses are by people not on the registry. Did you know that? Not on the registry. You're going to tell them be careful of everyone? Some people do that. And I get it, folks. It's a fine line to balance between good parenting and saying, be careful about people around you. Don't trust people too much, but, you don't want to push people away. You don't want to be rude to them either. And I don't want my kids to be fearful of everything around them. I know that's a balancing act. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. But the first and easiest thing you can do is don't bear any grudges and judges. You don't know. You don't know what's going on. You really don't. And if you want to believe that everybody who gets convicted must be guilty, and if you're arrested by the police, well, you must have done something wrong. And if you are on a registry, like a sex offender registry, you must be a sex offender. And if you're going to accept that, then you also have to accept the other side. So somebody like me, you have to accept that for 30 years, there was no issues. But guess what you trolls have done out there? You say, well, there must have been issues. They just didn't catch you. Okay, so you're guilty when you're found guilty, and that's invaluable. You can't change that. But if you weren't guilty for all this other time, then that's proof positive you must have been guilty, and they just didn't catch you. I mean, the irrationality is out of this world. It really is. Not to mention the fact that the privileged classes, the wealthy, and these folks and the well-connected, they get away with it for a long, long time. And Donald Trump is still getting away with it too pull a very obvious example out there. Okay? So, what I would urge you to do is get the facts, don't jump to conclusions, and don't assume that just because they put you on a list, everything's hunky and dory. NextDoor took the post down. Maybe they had it when I went the last time, pointed out some of these errors. But I think it had to do with the fact that it was inflammatory language and they just didn't want to hear any more about this. But what they did was they stifled an important conversation in the community on something that really is very important. And that's why I'm willing to engage people on here too and say, look, stop talking about scary sex offenders. Stop putting everybody in the same category. Stop assuming that because you're got in trouble for something, you must be guilty. And if you're going to look at the evidence, let's look at all the evidence. Let's look at the fact that for 30 plus years, from the time I was a camp counselor as a 19-year-old in college to the present day, there's been no evidence that I did anything. Some people have said, well, you did it twice. You were caught by Ghost CC Unit, and you were caught by Detective Robert M. Bauer. Well, as I point out, Ghost CC Unit's case was thrown out for the bullshit that it was. Detective Bauer did get away with it, although he didn't get away with it 6 years before when he tried to go after this woman, Dr. Rose Merchant. And even though it wasn't really a sex case, he attempted to humiliate, embarrass her, and he got her to lose her very lucrative career as deputy head of psychological services for the state of Maryland's Department of Corrections. That he did, and he paid no price for that, as far as I know. And she had to go into private practice. Now, he did not get his qualified immunity claims. That's true. She did sue him when he tried to hide behind qualified immunity. Maybe she got an undisclosed sum. I've never been able to find that out. But the fact of the matter is, that's part of the evidence and part of the record, right? That sheds light on his character and his credibility. Whereas, despite the fact that I have engaged Arizona Predator Prevention, other predator groups, other groups too, who have questioned me, 7 lawyers, a forensic analyst, and friends and relatives, who all of whom came after me about this horrible story. And all of them ended up grudgingly saying, something to your story. There is something to your story. Um, don't assume because you don't know. You don't know the facts. Get the facts. Not everybody on the registry is violent. Not everyone did something to a kid. Hell, there are kids on there too. There are people who didn't really do anything but offend a tiny little segment of society by doing something very often that was innocent. In some cases, people who declared that they had done something recanted their story and said, I was lying for attention, I didn't mean it, and did you think the court reversed it? No, because they make a lot of money convincing some of you out there that the danger is everywhere. They make a great deal of money. Look into it. You don't have to believe me. Look into it. But it's so much easier to do what many people will do on here, come back and call me names, call me perv, because it's so much simpler than actually thinking. This is ICAC Unpacked for the 21st day of August 2024. Have a good evening.